Hello, and welcome to Winning Classroom Management, a web series designed to help you restore the joy of teaching. Today we are looking at the strategy of praise. My name is Aaron Daffern. I'm an educator, author, coach, and trainer. My purpose here is to help us all restore the joy of teaching by looking at 4 keys that will help us win the classroom management game. Now, we are looking at the 4th key here, discipline. And we know that learning requires a solid foundation. Much like this table will fall if all 4 legs are not strong. Discipline is one of the 4 keys that's going to help us win the classroom management game. But discipline is so important, it's actually broken down into 2 smaller keys. This episode is looking at praise, and then the next episode will look at correction. So, praise. What is praise? Why is it important? And how does it actually work when we're talking about discipline? Well, it all has to do with the idea of attention. Whatever you as a teacher pay attention to, you will see more of. Your focus determines your reality. And unfortunately, many of our teachers today are focusing on the misbehaviors. They're fussing at kids. They're waiting for kids to mess up, and they're nitpicking at them all day long. And what happens is that attention that they're giving to those misbehaviors are actually reinforcing those behaviors so that they see them again and again and again. Because any behavior that receives attention is reinforced. And so what we should be doing, instead of focusing on the misbehaviors, is focusing on pro-social behaviors. We want to focus on the behaviors that meet our expectations, students that are kind, students that are focused, students that are paying attention, students that are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And instead focus our attention on those behaviors, because then those behaviors will be reinforced and we will see those behaviors again and again. Praise also helps us minimize psychological pain due to misbehavior. A lot of teachers resort to fussing at kids, just yelling at little Johnny because he's standing up when he shouldn't, or he doesn't have permission, or telling Susie to stop talking. And what we're doing is we're constantly belittling or shaming our students in front of their peers, and we're giving them a negative self-image. Instead, when we use praise, what we're doing is we are drawing attention to the behaviors we do want to see. So if little Johnny is in trouble because he is out of his seat without permission, instead of fussing at Johnny to get him to sit down, which might work, but at most would get his compliance and might cause some psychological pain because he might be embarrassed, and that might cause him to spiral further and further, we can praise students that are sitting quietly. We can praise someone sitting next to Johnny that is doing what she's supposed to be doing and give her praise, which allows him to understand what the expectation is without necessarily calling him out. It gives students a chance to correct their behavior when we are focusing on what we want to see. Because when we set our expectations and we make them clear, students in general want to meet those expectations. Now this comes back to relationships. All 4 of these keys are interrelated. And if teachers do not have a good relationship with the student, then praise is not going to work that well. But teachers, imagine those students that you have a good relationship with. There's a sense of belonging in the classroom, and you make very clear what your expectations are, and you praise and give attention to the students meeting those expectations. Yeah, they'll do it because they want to please you, because they want to fit into the group, because they feel that sense of belonging and they understand the norms in the classroom and they want to be a part of that. And if being a part of that means meeting your expectations and doing the right things, that's what they'll do. Only pay attention to the behaviors you want to see repeated. So that's one of the hardest things for teachers when they're trying to go through this classroom management journey, is we are used to just fussing at kids for doing the wrong things. Whenever we notice a behavior, we are reinforcing it. And this comes from behavioral psychology. Whatever gets attention gets reinforcement. Whatever gets reinforcement gets repeated. So we should only pay attention to the behaviors we want to see repeated. Now, how do we praise kids? Praise in itself is an acronym. It should be personal, recurring, assorted, immediate, specific, and enthusiastic. So good attention is personal. Don't stay broad. Don't say the class is doing this. No, get personal. Johnny is doing a good job. Susie is excellent right now because she is put the name on there so they know exactly who's doing the right thing. Kids don't want negative attention, but they all want positive attention. It needs to be recurring. So it needs to happen continually. So think about if you're watching a football game, you've always got two people in the broadcast booth. You've got a play-by-play announcer that is literally describing word by word what is happening in the screen. Initially, that's what you need to be. It needs to be recurring. Eventually, once your class is on cruise control, you can go to the other person in the broadcast booth, the color analyst, that chimes in every once in a while with just an opposing view, but doesn't necessarily talk all the time. But we need to be pretty high on our praise repetition initially until we get the class going and we get them humming along at the level we want them to be at. It needs to be assorted, so we can't have 3 stock phrases again and again and again. We got to mix things up. It has to be new and unique because our brains are drawn to novelty, but if it's repetitive and there's a pattern, kids will eventually tune it out. It needs to be immediate. Attention reinforces the behavior when given immediately. If you pull the kid out 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, say, you know what, 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, you did a really, really nice thing when you helped your neighbor out. Unfortunately, they'll receive it, but you're not going to reinforce the behavior. Attention needs to happen immediately if you want to reinforce that behavior. You need to be specific. So rather than saying Johnny is doing a good job, because maybe you're trying to get Susie to do a good job, even if Susie is paying attention, even if Susie does want to receive praise because she notices that Johnny receives praise, she likes you, so she wants to do what Johnny's doing so she can get noticed. What does doing a good job mean? You need to describe what you see. Johnny is sitting in his chair, he's got his pencil in his hand, he is writing his name, and he is looking at the board waiting for the first set of instructions. Okay, that's specific. Now Susie can do those things if she wants to receive attention. And it needs to be enthusiastic. The kids will listen to your nonverbals much more than they'll listen to the words coming out of your mouth. So make sure your nonverbals match the actual words. It needs to be a good tone, it needs to be upbeat and chipper. You need to actually seem like you're excited. But those 6 things, personal, recurring, assorted, immediate, specific, enthusiastic, that's what good praise looks like. Now there's 2 different things that we want to notice when we are praising students for doing the right things: initiation and continuation. So we're really good at praising students who initiate desired behaviors. They get out their books, right? They start on their assignment, or they help their friend when they fall down, or they clean up some papers. We're good at praising that, but we also need to be on the lookout for students who sustain or continue desired behaviors. A lot of kids can start correct behaviors, they just can't sustain it. 5 minutes, they're done. Maybe it's an individual work assignment, maybe it's a group assignment. They're supposed to stay with their groups and it's supposed to be 20 minutes, right? And so 10 minutes, 15 minutes out, students start dropping out because it gets bored, they want to do something else. So your praising needs to shift in that situation from who's starting work to who is continuing the work. And you're praising and noticing students that are continuing to work with their groups, continuing to do individual reading or whatever that task is. So look for both of those. So praise is reinforcing desired behavior. Here's 3 strategies to get started. First, print a class roster. Place a tally mark next to each student's name after they receive praise. You'll notice that you probably have a higher estimation of how distributed that praise is initially than it actually is. We tend to praise the same few kids again and again and again because they do what we need to. You know which kids need our praise? The kids that are the worst behaving students. We need to find and watch them like hawks and find anything that they're doing that is remotely close to our expectations and praise them, because that's going to reinforce that behavior, and that's how we get them back to our behavioral norms. But print up a tally chart and just a roster and just keep track and see how balanced your praise is. You want to make sure it's spread out evenly amongst the class, not just your best kids. They're already behaving good. You can set a time-bound goal. So if you want to challenge yourself, say, all right, I've got 10 minutes here. And the end of class is always the worst. The end of the period is always the worst before the bell rings. So maybe you set yourself a timer for the last 10 minutes of class, and your goal is to give 20 praise statements, 2 a minute, 1 every 30 seconds. Give yourself a goal and just keep track. So you can, until it becomes natural, set a time-bound goal to help you praise early and often. Another thing you could do is pennies in the pocket. One thing that is implied but not necessarily discussed outright in this web episode is that praise is going to be negated if you're still fussing at kids. So it's hard for us to stop our constant attention to the negative behavior. And instead of praising, we immediately want to jump to that negative behavior and correct it. There are ways to do that without negating the benefits of praise, and we're going to talk about that in our next episode. But one way to kind of keep track of your balance of positive and negative statements, because it should be heavily skewed towards the positive, is called pennies in the pocket. So take some pennies, or anything, I just pick pennies because they're small, and put some in each pocket. And what you want to do is designate maybe the left pocket for positive, the right pocket for negative. Every time that you give a positive statement or a praise statement, transfer a penny from the right to the left. But if you end up fussing at a kid, transfer a penny from the left to the right. See how balanced you are at the end of the day. Hopefully, you're not balanced. Hopefully, if you started with, let's say, 20 in each, hopefully all 40 are over in the left, or maybe 38 or 39 are in the left. It should be heavily skewed towards the positive. But every time you make a negative statement, you fuss at the kids, you give them a negative attention, move a penny back over to the right, and you can just kind of use that as a way to gauge yourself to see how well you're doing with praise. Your focus determines your reality. And so you want to reinforce the behaviors you want repeated. Your attention is what does that. So reserve your attention for the students that are meeting your expectations. If you have any other questions, you can find me at aarondaffern.com or email me at aarondaffern@gmail.com.